All right, let's get to the defending national runner-up. It's the TCU Horned Frogs, 13-2 in 2022. They were 9-0 in the regular season in the Big 12. A loss to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game, a win in a really fantastic Fiesta Bowl college football playoff semifinal game over Michigan, and then just getting the doors blown off them against Georgia. Regardless, TCU really kind of went as far as a non-blue blood has ever gone, really. I mean, Oregon back in, I think, 2014 when they lost to Florida State, probably the closest one. But for TCU to jump out of the gate in Sonny Dykes' first year and go 12-0 in the regular season, really, really incredible. That being said, Lucas, heavy losses for this team. 123rd in returning production. You lose your Heisman finalist quarterback, Max Duggan. You lose your top two running backs. You lose your top three wide receivers. You lose your offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley. You lose a Jim Thorpe Award winner in the secondary. It's going to be a blank slate for TCU in 2023. What are your thoughts on the Horned Frogs?
Yeah, it's a rebuilding job, but I feel like TCU, the situation feels very similar. I think a lot of people saw what happened in that national championship game and the guys that they lost and how they only won. I think they were like 7-1 in one score games last season. And I feel like this year's similar. I think people are expecting them a regression to the mean. That being said, I'm pretty high again on TCU. I was high on them last year. I think yes, obviously losing their leader and quarterback Max Duggan is huge, but we have to remember he was not the starter coming out of training camp last year. That was the guy that is going to be starting this year. Chandler Morris was the original starter, then got hurt in their opener against Colorado, and the rest is history. But they also brought back in, Trey Sanders was one of the best running back prospects a couple of years ago. He transfers in from Alabama. I do worry a little bit about the receiver room. That being said, their
A lot of
offensive
transfers
line,
there. A lot
yeah,
of
a lot of
transfers.
transfers there. They still have Savion Williams. They still have Jarrett Wiley. They got Jalen Robinson from UCF, who is a very, very productive wide receiver there the last couple of years. And I think their offensive line is still going to be solid, still bring a bunch of guys who have experience. And I think the biggest key, like we were talking about, is probably going to be the defense once again. This was a defense that was slightly improved from a couple of years ago. You mentioned no more Travius Hodge Tomlinson, the Thorpe Award winner, but his counterpart on the other side, Josh Newton, was pretty darn
Yep.
good too. Was first team All Big 12. He'll be back. They bring in a couple other decent transfers of there, as well as they have two All Big 12 linebackers. So I think I think they could be surprise people again, which is crazy talking about a national runner up. But I don't know if I see the regression as hard for TCU as a lot of other people, but I could be completely wrong on that.
Yeah, I think we might be on different sides here when we get to the over/under. But let me get the schedule here quickly. The non-conference, three home games for TCU. They'll host Colorado week one, big noon kickoff. Then Nicholls State and SMU. They will have four Big 12 home games: West Virginia, BYU, Texas, Baylor. On the road, they will go to Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. I'm going to take under 7.5 wins. 7.5, the over/under at FanDuel. Over -144, under plus 118. I'm going to take the under. It was one that I had to think hard on. I wrote down under, and then in parentheses I put revisit after kind of I'm done with all of mine. Just because on one hand, the losses are it's just crazy to think
Mm-hmm.
you lose your best defensive back, you lose maybe your two top on the defensive line, D Winters and Dylan Horton, all of the losses on offense. But like you said, Max Duggan wasn't the starting quarterback last year, and the running backs weren't as well known. You also have a new offensive coordinator. Garrett Riley's gone. Max Duggan is gone. Interested to see what Chandler Morris can do. I was listening to, I think, the summer school episode with TCU's writer, and they said Chandler Morris was a really good backup, a really respectable guy in the locker room last year after he got benched. So we'll see. But I think the combination of the losses on the field. And then I look at the road games at Oklahoma, at Texas Tech, who we'll get to next, at Kansas State, at Houston. You get Texas at home. The schedule doesn't do you any favors. You play kind of the other three teams in that top tier, at least the supposed top tier of the conference. So I'm going to go under. I think it's 7-5 or 6-6 for TCU.
I'm gonna once again go over, which is now three
Yep.
overs, so I now have to keep track uh, and kind of catch myself here.
This is no
But
positive. You just want every team to go 9-3. You want
I
every
do.
you want 132 bowl eligible teams come December.
Hey, this is why the SEC only plays 8 conference games, so then that can actually become a reality. But no, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go over. I just think when you look at their non-conference, they don't play. I don't believe a Power Five team.
Colorado.
They play Colorado, but
One of the worst from last year.
yes, one of the worst from last year. Colorado nickel, and then they have SMU at home, and I think their first 5 or 7 games are fairly favorable until they get to at Kansas State, and then they have a bye week, and then their schedule really gets tough from there on. I think if they're going into that bye either 7-1 or 6-2, I think you feel pretty good about them potentially splitting those last 4 games. So, and I'm a Jalen Morris believer. I just think Sonny Dykes is kind of an offensive guru, and that system I think is kind of plug and play. And they were very, very high on Chandler Morris going last year. Apparently, in training camp last season, it wasn't even that big of a competition. Chandler Morris had really won that outright, so I'm excited to see him play. So over for me at 7.5. I'm living and dying by the Horned Frogs this year once again.
Hey, didn't you pick TCU to get to the championship game in the Big 12 last year? You did, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Lucas is a true believer of the Horned Frogs.